Appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay? So I'm Mark Vafiades. I'm also running for this position. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'll speak about some of the issues that I'm highlighting, and then I'll go into some detail about that as well. And then we'll take the questions as Dave mentioned. So I've been in the healthcare industry for over 20 years. I specialize in electronic medical records. When I was living in California, I was part of the administrative team at one of the medical centers for Kaiser Permanente. So in addition to the fact that I administered the electronic medical records program, I was also part of the administrative team at the med center, determining basically what happens at the med center for the patients and so forth. I have worked over the past in my career for the federal government, I've worked for the state government, and I've also owned my own small business. And as Mike Van Meter mentioned, I was in law enforcement. When I lived in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area, I was a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Deputy Reserve, and I worked in patrol for over 20 years. So that was a very, very interesting career, side career. If anyone is interested in law enforcement, it is very, very rewarding. So in any event, I also have been an advocate for citizens and families over the years, specifically regarding legislation and how that legislation affects citizens and families, specifically economically, because a lot of times it's not really clear when something passes how it's going to affect the citizens, especially in their pocketbooks. So I have spoken to the folks in my district, and there are three issues that they mentioned to me more than anything else. They're the three issues that are also very important to me that I'm highlighting. Number one is education. Transparency in education and parental rights. And again, I'll go into these in a little more detail. Number two is crime and supporting the police. And although Fairfax is a very safe, relatively so, county, crime has gone up everywhere, including Fairfax County. There's a lot of spillover from Washington. And again, I'll get into a little more detail on that. And so again, very, very important, these issues that we speak of. And thirdly are taxes and some of the issues that affect taxes and the economy here in Virginia. So those are the three issues that people are so concerned about. I first want to talk about transparency in education. If nothing else came out of the lockdowns, parents were able to see what was going on in the classrooms by way of Zoom meetings. And in many cases, they weren't happy. And they attended school board meetings to try to make their voices heard regarding that. And they found that they weren't welcome in many of the school board meetings. Now, this isn't a knock against all teachers, against all administrators, but it's too many to stand by and not do anything about. There was a really bad incident in Loudoun County, which you may have seen on the news, where a father was addressing the school board regarding what happened to his daughter in a school bathroom. She was sexually assaulted, and he was outraged, obviously, and the school board didn't want to hear it. He got more angry, and he ended up being arrested. This is not what should have happened to someone that is addressing a really important concern of the parents. So transparency and again, the rights of parents are prime, and they should be. And if the individual counties don't do anything to make sure that parents have primacy in what's going on with their kids, then I think Richmond needs to pass a parental bill of rights to ensure those rights are in stone. Number two is crime. As we have seen, crime has gone up everywhere. And yeah, a lot of people say that Fairfax is very safe, and it is relatively so, but it has gone up tremendously in Fairfax County as everywhere else. And some of the reasons for this is the defund the police movement. Some of it was termed police reform over the past couple of years. It's also, there's been a very, very anti-police attitude by way of a lot of people in the media and some legislators. So this has contributed to crime. It's contributed, unfortunately, if there are kids who may be, not necessarily, they may be delinquents slightly, and what happens is if they get stopped by the police and they don't respect the police, then that's bad not only for the police, it's bad for them too, because it gets into a very confrontational situation. So those are some of the things I want to address when it comes to law enforcement. And third is the economy. As I mentioned, there's a lot of legislation that's been passed that really affects citizens horribly. One of them is what was termed the Clean Car Act, which is basically tying Virginia to the California EV mandate. There are also 16 other states that did the same thing. This says, if you're not 100% familiar with it, that by 2035, 100% of new cars sold in Virginia must be electric. It also says that by 2026, 35% of new cars are supposed to be electric in Virginia. This is very, very expensive, and it's not very insightful, because as we are running out of electricity, as we pare down some of the generation by way of fossil fuels, our demand is going to go up. The price of electricity is going to go up, and we don't have the infrastructure to handle that. Also, gasoline cars, fossil fuel cars, are very, very clean now. They're not the way they were in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. They are really considered PZEVs, practically zero emission vehicles. We have solved the problem of polluting cars, but now there's a whole industry that wants to push towards electrics, and we're not ready for it. Electric vehicles are great in certain instances. They're great commuter cars. It should be a choice. It should not be a mandate. So that is another big issue that I have been speaking to the constituents about, that they're very, very concerned about. So in any event, those are my three big issues. There are lots of other issues to discuss as well. Would love to get into it, but basically I'm really concerned with the taxpayers and the citizens and what happens in the economy based on legislation that passes, and I am mindful of that as we pass new legislation. Thank you very much.
Okay, to the citizens, and what we're going to have this year is that you'll be receiving $200 as an individual taxpayer, $400 as a couple. That will be refunded to you. There's also $1,000 that's being to increase the standard deduction you get on your tax returns. So that will be several $100s more of savings to individual citizens. We did not want to do the corporate tax cuts because sometimes surpluses and sometimes deficits are temporary. And we can't make long-term decisions sometimes based on that deficit or based on that surplus that we have. Corporations were not asking for a corporate tax relief. This was something that Governor Youngkin came up with. They were more actually interested in a machine and tools tax cut. That was what was more important machine and tools tax was a more important tax cut for them. And the one thing that the governor was proposing is a decrease in taxes for wealthier Virginians by indexing the taxes at a lower rate for people, which would have helped those at the upper ends of the spectrum more dramatically than it would at people from the lower end of the economic spectrum. We're doing great in Virginia. We're already $400 million ahead on revenue for next year. We'll continue to look at cuts. But let me give you a frustration that I have with the administration currently right now. We have 24 juvenile detention centers here in the Commonwealth, and I'm trying to consolidate them. You know what the student-teacher ratio is? 1.5 students per teacher, 230 teachers for 351 kids. And I talked to the Secretary of Education, and she just stares back at me. I said, ma'am, we need to address this. Nothing. We got a situation where public safety dollars are going into the state. It pays half of these facilities, half for these facilities, and localities pay the other half. And so, you go to the public safety secretary and said, sir, we only have 351 kids in 1,445 facilities. We need to consolidate facilities. We can save tremendous amounts of money. Same thing. They're just not able to respond to trying to do with the details of government to provide better services for kids at a lower cost and dedicate the savings to other important things to voters and constituents here in the Commonwealth. But we are cutting taxes, but we have lost track of the fact that in 2008, we had a huge hit to our school system. It has taken us this long just to get us back to a little bit ahead of where we were in 2008. And so that's why the money from the surpluses that we've had have had to go be plowed back into our school system, plowed back into mental health, where everybody agrees we have a shortfall. And so that is I think, a summation of kind of where we are on the whole tax issue from a state level.
Yeah, plus it should go back to the taxpayers. I differ with my friend Dave on one thing. He said that the surplus may be temporary, but spending is not temporary. And if we increase spending, then that doesn't go away. But the surplus is more money coming in than we need. It should go back to the taxpayers. The taxes in Virginia, especially Fairfax County, are just outrageous. I talk to people all the time in my area, and the real estate taxes have gone up between 40 and 50% in 5 years. It's outrageous. They can't afford it. I mean, they're trying to make ends meet. They have kids in school, and they're trying to pay for they're trying to pay their taxes that have gone up that much. Car tax. You all live, I think, in Fairfax County. Again, outrageous. 20 years ago, Governor Schwarzenegger got into office because there was a recall from Governor Gray Davis. The number one issue was taxes, car taxes rather. And the car taxes were much lower than Virginia. Now, I hate to say this because it seems like I have a lot of money, which I don't, but I paid $4,700 last year on my 2 cars. I don't have a Lamborghini. I don't have a Ferrari or a Porsche. I have a Dodge and a Jeep Grand Cherokee. $4,700. This year it was $4,200. Is that reasonable for an average working class person? No, it is not. So in any event, taxes are too high. I would move to lower or repeal the car tax. I would make sure if there's a surplus, it goes back to the citizens, and that's where it belongs.
The one thing I would just add is that your property taxes on your home, we're about in the middle of states in the United States on our property taxes on homes. Every state makes different choices as to what they tax and what they don't. So it makes comparisons kind of difficult. Some states don't have a very high sales tax, but they don't have an income tax. So it's a very difficult calculation for any of us to deal with. But in Virginia, your property taxes are reasonable, and the state is providing $1 billion of tax relief to localities by paying our car taxes for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I don't think they're reasonable. And 40%, 50% in 5 years is not reasonable. Even if it's relatively reasonable compared to the other states, 40 or 50% is not. If someone bought their home 5 years ago and they didn't anticipate their taxes going up that much, they're in trouble. So, in any event.
Have dealt with the fact that the federal government has supplied money to localities, money to states for specific purposes, general money to states to survive through the COVID epidemic or the pandemic, where the economies were brought to a halt in terms of businesses having to stop operating. Sales taxes, coming in much lower, but we've had just a remarkable rebound. We're $400 million ahead of projections. We're going to be, I think, in the legislature coming up this year, we'll be discussing further opportunities to cut taxes and also to perhaps continue the upward growth of support for teachers. We're still not where we need to be with teacher salaries. It has taken us a long time to get back, as I explained earlier, from the 2008 Great Recession, Great Depression, whatever it was. We took a really bad hit on education funding, and we're slowly starting to restore that. Okay. Here's the reason that we're looking at this. And it is not a casino bill in terms of mandating one. It's to provide a referendum from Fairfax County citizens to make a decision. That's what the Silver Line was created for. That's what the business community paid extra taxes for, is to create that Silver Line to do high-density development. We're losing $150 million a year to MGM in the National Harbor of Virginians going over there, and we're funding Maryland schools. I believe that it belongs in the Tysons area. That's our downtown. Our commercial real estate market here locally is deteriorating rapidly. These are all 10-year leases on these buildings that people who rent space in them have, and people who had 50,000 square feet now want 10. People who had 10 now want 2. People who had 2 don't want any. Revenue to the county is deteriorating, and I worry that Tysons Corner is become a ghost town because, as you know, people are working from home. And if we created a conference center, which is what the bill will deal with, creating a conference center, entertainment district, hotels, with a casino that can attract business from the other side of the river to the wealthier parts of Maryland, Bethesda, Potomac, Northwest DC, Gaithersburg, people coming across into Virginia for entertainment purposes. And it will be great for the unions who are going to be constructing these facilities, and also great for the union Unite Here, who does most of the union operations. It'll create great jobs here in the county. But this is up to the citizens to decide. We're a Dillon Rule state. They can't make these decisions on their own. We have to give them the authority to do that. And all I'll be doing is introducing a bill that will give Fairfax County residents the choice to make that decision, because we're going to have to do something about our economy here in Fairfax, in terms of to generate the revenue that we need to operate the world-class school system we have, the mental health services we have, which are the best in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we just need to take a look at the future and realize that things are not always going to be as they have been in the past.
To tax, and when I say tax, I don't mean from the government, but tax the people who can least afford it. If you look at the casinos, it's not really rich people smoking cigars. It's people that are trying to take what money they have and make it more. And it of course ends up the other way around. It's very bad for those people. I will say this, however, if there is a true referendum and the citizens actually get to make the decision whether they want a casino or not, I wouldn't stand in their way. It's up to the citizens of that district whether they want that casino. So again, I'm against casinos in general. I wouldn't introduce a bill for a casino, but if the citizens decide that's what they want, then that's what I'd go with.
We already have a circumstance where online gambling on sports events is becoming huge. The lottery is what is draining most of people of limited means. $5 a day when they can't afford to do that, at least with a casino operation. You have to have a car. You have to have the ability to have several $100s that you can do. And we either get on board with this or the rest of the world eats our lunch. And I don't like gambling. I didn't like the lottery when it went through. I don't like the gray machines that show up in our convenience stores and restaurants and bars, which are quote-unquote skill games, so they don't fall under the gambling category, but they're gambling. And so we just have to deal with the realities, but you let the people decide, not us.